Hi, today I'm here to talk about a very important subject, which is it's going to be a short video, and I wanted to talk about grammar syntax, how that relates to mathematics, how that relates to music and with language learning, but also with geometry. But how I got this idea was from just studying math and then seeing how it's so intricately harmonious. Just reading about math and how it helped me to understand language learning a little bit better. And you might ask how. Well, first of all, today, I was just reading this book called Thomas Hardy's Tess of the Dubervilles. And reading fiction is a subject that startled me and made me struggle a lot since the beginning of learning anything, because I was very good at nonfiction, but was horrible in fiction. And I asked myself, I was very good at music, I was good at playing instruments, but why am I so bad at reading poetry, reading fiction? And I saw that maybe I lacked mathematical proficiency, right? And in mathematical proficiency, it can help you to understand music better. I felt like, what is the most basic thing about energy or vibrations or life in general? And I felt like perhaps it's the word, the musicality of the world. And if you put it into essence, what is musicality? And there are many ways to look at musicality. And generally, there are two theories. One is mathematics. The second theory is poetry. But being perhaps an MBTI-T, I have a strong tendency towards that. Just being a bit of a thinker more than a feeler, I felt more akin towards the idea that music is more akin to mathematics. I mean, just look at this, right? This is Bach's fugue, right? This is a fretboard. I was just taking notes on it, and there are numbers and statistics, right? I was just putting of course, this is the sixth string is D, therefore the zeroth string would be D, and then the first one would be D sharp, the second would be C, the third one would be C sharp. So I felt like it's more akin to mathematics more than just poetry. But maybe when I was reading this book, I was like, no, maybe mathematics and poetry are the same thing. It's not a different thing. I would need not separate the two, right? Because a lot of scientists say mathematics is the language in which God speaks. It's funny, when I was reading Tess of the Dubervilles, Charles Dickens was, it just didn't match for me. But Duberville, this Thomas Hardy guy, comprehended for me much more easier. I could understand how Tess was feeling when she rejected the man called, her cousin or something like that. Some kind of her aristocratic money good getter, cousin, and she rejected him because she didn't like him, right? She didn't love him. She didn't feel anything for him, and he was just touching her, like sexually unamusing to her, even though he kisses her really well or whatever it is. Because perhaps she doesn't feel like he's an equal to her intellect, her pious, her whatever it is. And why am I talking about this? Because you can't really boil down all that into mathematics. You can't. I can't. I'll not do that. But at the same time, even Thomas Hardy has a structure in his fiction book. He has some kind of diction that really matches me. Charles Dickens doesn't match me in terms of like the rhythms of his wordings, the rhythms of his writing. I get that he's like in the old times, like this British way of speaking. I don't know what you see, like the Christmas Carol, like it doesn't match me. But Thomas Hardy, he doesn't have that like old-timey British way of speaking. He just speaks in a way that's genuine to himself. Conan O'Doyle is kind of in the middle, but I like him because at least he has a scientific bent to his writing, which although it's hard for me too, but I like it. Anyway, I guess Thomas Hardy's rhythms matches me, and that's why it's more comprehending for me to understand. Maybe the way he writes is just more easier. I don't know. What am I saying? So the title of this video is how grammar, syntax, mathematics, music, and language learning and geometry matches each other. As much as I want to say that language learning is all about just read a textbook, grammar in use. If you're learning English, grammar in use. Get a HSK textbook if you're learning Chinese, or a JLPT for Japanese. Just get a textbook and just solve all those things. There's a lot of that prevalent here where I live in Seoul, in Korea. I guess it's kind of the same in America, kind of, but maybe not as strong. I mean, we're missing the point here, where the thing that the problem with that is when you study in that kind of way, you're not getting the bigger picture of things. You're not even studying the tradition of grammar. You're not even studying the tradition. You're just studying a copyist thing. Like you're just studying something what somebody else thinks of how it should be studied. What I'm saying is let's go to tradition. But I don't even think tradition is the right way, because tradition is mathematics. Tradition is musical and poetry. What do I mean by that? I mean, let's look at the forests, not the trees. HSK and JLPT is all about just getting your test scores in order. I would deem just a textbook about grammar much better than a JLPT thing. So why am I saying studying grammar in terms of mathematics? Because when I study music theory, there are two ways I can do it. One way is study how people did it in the past. The Western tradition. There was a C, you go to E, then you go to F, and then you go to G. Like this kind of diatonic chord patterns that they made. And like you have to follow this or something like that. Of course, they never say you have to follow this. They just say this has been done. This has been natural throughout millennia, at least in the Western tradition. But in the East, it's completely different. It's completely different. Harmonies are different. There are different types of notes. Not types of notes, but there are more gradations of notes in Eastern tradition in music. Therefore, mathematics is the key, right? If you really want to understand music, at least go to tradition first. Then even when you study tradition, you realize, hey, maybe this is not the right thing. Maybe mathematics is more deeper, and it is. It is. But even mathematics is not deep. The deeper thing is poetry, where it's not logical, it's chaotic, because that's more akin to reality. And grammar is basically a mathematical thing. It's a syntaxical thing. You know, maybe that's why I struggle to understand Charles Dickens. Maybe that's why Thomas Hardy was more akin to me, because maybe he's a more modern writer than, Charles Dickens, and he doesn't write in a way to, in a certain cultural sense at that era, whereas Thomas Hardy has more of a fluid sense of how he writes. He doesn't have to restrain himself in a certain order of things around this 18th century where Charles Dickens was. So in language learning, what I do is I study mathematics and I study music theory. And just reading, I'm trying to play this guitar song, Fugue. And of course you can just play the guitar, but for me, what I found was just wherever I go to a cafe, go to a subway, with my friends, and I just read this and print it out, and I just read this and imagine the fretboard. And when I imagine the fretboard, I imagine the sounds that come out of it, so I can study without what we say playing by ear or playing by just sight or something. Sightseeing is the right word. You can study how sightseeing works just by imagining the fretboard, just reading this. Even though you don't know what exactly the music is, you can imagine it just by reading this, right? What I'm trying to say. Wow, how long? It's already 12 minutes. I know I'm all around here, and I really don't care, because this is how my mind works, and this is the best way for me to speak. Of course, I'm not the best at speaking right now. Like, I'm not a competent speaker in my eye. I know some people think I'm okay, but in my eye, I'm not okay. But this is one of the ways I challenge myself, just, going into different subjects and, uniting all these things. So how does this pertain to language learning? And how does this pertain to Tess of the Dubervilles? What I'm saying is, let's look at the big overview of things when we learn a language. Because for me, I'm learning Hanzu, which is ancient Chinese and Chinese right now. I have a bigger advantage as being a Korean because there's more language family tree connection than an American learning Chinese. But the Chinese language is more pictorial. It has a geometrical sense of how the language works. So I can't follow the way the Western people teach us languages. But now I'm trying to study German. And I'm like, I'm getting confused. I'm getting like, am I supposed to study like HSK? How am I supposed to study grammar? Because it's so different. These two languages are so different. And I just realized, it's just basically music theory. Because when I'm writing music, I am writing music, and I'm gonna upload it on YouTube. I don't think in terms of tradition. I don't think in terms of what other people did. I think in terms just in my mind, and I create it out of mathematics. And I realized the same thing is happening in grammar. Same thing with my programming, but that's a different story later on. But syntax and grammar is basically music. It's just basically music of that country. And how do you get that? You have to learn musically. That's the basic thing. You have to learn musically. I guess the greater thing is to learn how to compose music. Not doing DJs, like mixing in music. It's not embarrassing to those DJs out there. I don't mean to offend you. saying. The Chinese and the Koreans in the 16th century used to study music with an I Ching description, meaning I Ching was basically a binary way of thinking about the world, from 1 and 2, yin and yang. That's why it's mathematical, the way they study music. And Isaac Newton did that with his music theory, with colors, how colors reacted with do, re, mi, fa, sol, or something like that. I'm just saying that's a more deeper way of doing things. Maybe not the deepest way. It's not the deepest way, but it is a deeper way, and you have to accept the priorities straight. You can't reject priorities. That's my way of language learning. And what I wanted to talk about here is not just language learning. That's just the half of the thing. The other half is how to be a better studier of literature, poems. You know, poems and fiction, like me, like a struggling guy trying to be a writer, trying to write fiction, trying to understand one of the basic classics in the world. It's maybe not a difficult thing, maybe not an easy thing, but yeah, I mean, like, maybe it's okay to me to pause here, just for me to think before I speak. Just that you know, when we're studying literature, you know, of course, it's not just fiction. You know, like books like Chuang Tzu or the Bible has a lot of poetic bent to it. It's not completely prose. It's more literary. Literary things are not too logical, and when it's not too logical, it gives us bigger room to reflect and contemplate and repeat how we read things. We can repeat reading the same fiction. You know, with scientific things, we don't allow repetition, but with the Bible, because it's a very esoteric thing, you cannot help but not frown. Like you cannot frown against a person who's repeating to read the Bible or the Tess of the Dubervilles, because he's just trying to understand the depth of it. Because poetry is basically depth. You know, it's not prose, and prose is something you can just read once and you just kind of take it away. You know, but literature is something you have to repeat and study deeply. And if you cannot honor mathematics, how can you honor poetics? You can't. So that's my point here. Let's try to, I mean, not honor tradition, but like at least do the basics right before we go to the higher upper ups. Before we go against the holier than thou things, the holy things. Let's at least perfect our fundamentals. Mathematics. Let's not go down more down than that, right? I mean, the HSK and JLPT or all those things. No. If you want to study language learning, study the mathematics of it, the syntax of it. I read the German Great Gatsby because I read Great Gatsby in English so many times. So because when I read the German one, I know what the meaning is, even though I don't understand the words. I'm trying to just study the pronunciation, the musicality of it, so I can memorize the syntax. And you know, lyrics, you know, when you study the lyrics, you don't study the lyrics, you don't memorize lyrics. It just comes to you. You don't memorize lyrics, you don't put effort in it. It's yoga. You know, yoga, you don't put effort in it. Shout out to my my other video about postures and study. Look at that video, and I talk about yoga, how you shouldn't put effort into your exercises. The same way with music. Music is not effort. It's completely about flow. Yet there is a big discipline in it. There's a big discipline inside that effort. That's the key to success. I'm just saying. Yeah, because also reference to my other video called How to Study 음악적으로 배우는 법. It's my Korean video. Look at it with AI if you can. It would be great. Look at the translations of it. It's easy. And I basically talk about how to study in terms of musicality. Nobody really talks about this. But there's only... But also there's other video called Confucius. And he talks about musicality. It all helps each other, I'm just saying. So in terms of language learning, the conclusion of this video is, in terms of language learning, let's look at the trees and the forest. The tree is the tradition, the mathematics of things, the syntax. But the forest is the poetics. Focus on the two. And second, with literature and fiction and poems, appreciate syntax also. But realize that's not everything. Thank you. If you have questions, if you find I find it difficult by just speaking about it. But like everything is everything is what do you call it? Nothing is stand to correctness. It's not brick by brick. Nothing is really like that. Nothing is definite. And accept that reality. And sometimes we have to be quiet and silenced. And do as our priorities ask us to do. I'll try to be more elaborate next time. But be sure to do this. Like if you want the more brass tacks version of explaining things, please ask for a comment. May I ask in the comments, what do you mean by this or that? What do you mean what to do? I'm just saying. But I guess I did explain some things. I guess like some action points that we can do is rather than when we're studying music theory, try to study the mathematics of it. Or studying language learning, try to see the musical tones and diction of each syntax we see in German and Chinese. When we're studying Chinese, try to see the geometry of Hanzu, the geometry of the pictorial language. And when you see the geometry, try to see, for example, Tess of the Dubervilles, in one paragraph, how does he structure the book? In a pictorial sense. His structure is basically a pictorial thing. You could be pictorial with music, but that's when we're advanced. We're still doing the fundamentals. How does that relate? Study language in those things. Like, for me, I study The Great Gatsby in German because I know Great Gatsby in literary fiction by heart, like music. So I can read the German version just like music. So I can just focus on the pronunciation more than the meaning of it. So it's more flowing, the way I learn languages. Third, with fiction, try to see the mathematics within the fiction. That's the key point. If you want more detailed explanations, ask for a comment. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you.